So minor changes I would like to touch on, but these are not minor lah. This one is relief lah, penjana, in the way how pemulih penjana and all this trying to in a way encourage more transaction, more real property transaction, so that the market can be more vibrant lah. Disposal of 3 residential property are exempted from the RPGT. This one is subject to election. You have to do election. You tell to elect. Let's say you have 5 properties you saw in this time frame. Then you elect whichever the better benefit one. So maybe the 3 most expensive one. So the one that makes most money one, the 3 of it you elect to get exemption. So it started in June 1st of 2020, but then ended in end of 2021. So now, as we are speaking today, 2022 May, is no more such benefit anymore. So this RPGT Exemption Order 2020, pay zero, no need to pay any RPGT. So talk about this, I just want to highlight to you there are other exemption that's in a way overlapping. So if let's say you have a transaction that is between husband and wife, or between parents and children, or grandparents and children, this is originally already exemptable. It can be exempted. So therefore, here it says that not including so the 3 property which is being disposed of is not acquired by the way, so there are exclusions. Anyway, later on we will go into all those Schedule 2, the different paragraphs. So to know about the exemptions, the benefit of exemptions, I will talk about this in more length, in more detail just yet. Another thing is that there is a term that is conditional contract. So this one, I think the box jump a bit. Conditional contract. What is conditional contract? This term came out in examination also, in a way to try catch some of those maybe not so detailed reading. So you're not detailed in reading, you will not remember what is conditional contract. So conditional contract in para 16 it actually says your sales and purchase is conditional because of the fact you need final decision of the state authority, mostly state authority to approve. So a lot of it is leasehold property. So when it's leasehold property, the sales and purchase, although signed, money paid, everything, it needs to go to the state authority to get the final approval. So the timeline is important, because without the state approval, it's not considered so. So therefore, the timing here, the contract of disposal of a residential property executed on 1st of June 2020, but not later than 31st 2021, duly stamped, and not later than 31st January 2022. And the approval is obtained on or after 1st of June 2020. So that means you may be signing your sales and purchase agreement, but not necessarily you can get this exemption because your conditional contract falls outside the time period. Just a simple answer to understand. It's just simple for the fact that in law it is not yet so until the state authority approves it. Key areas of RPGT to remember. So this one I would quickly go through, because of course you all have to study for the exam. You have to go in detail. I just want to pick up some of the common ones for revision for myself as well as for those who are listening in. So I would say you can go back to my vendor number 2, the video on vendor 2, timestamp around 26 minute 20 second. Those exemptions which involves husband and wife, parent and children, and grandparent and grandchildren. So this is interestingly, I must mention, different from stamp duty. Stamp duty transfer between husband and wife, between spouse, you get 100%. Transfer between parent and children is 50%. But RPGT, for all these 3 categories, transfer between spouse, transfer between parent and children, or grandparent and children, is 100% exemption. Why is it so? You have to ask yourself, why is it so? So that when you come to examination, you don't get confused. Now, I just want to touch quickly on this. You think about RPGT as more of a family issue. That means the real estate is within the family. So let's say father having issue, probably diagnosed of terminal ill disease, then the property that is in his name, he wants to give it to his family members. Direct family members mean the wife, also the kids. So in such a thing of contingent issue, the government should not cause suffering anymore to the family. So therefore, the real property gains in this type of gains is supposed to be no choice one. That means they transfer it to the kids, not for the purpose of making money. So this type of transfer is 100% exemption. But for stamp duty is different. Stamp duty is registered on any transfer of property or important documents or contracts. Stamp Act, Stamping Act, the purpose is different. The purpose is not about whole family, family survival or whatever. It's not. The stamp duty payable is a way to signify a certain event. So when a event is supposed to be official and being recognizable in court of law, then you need to stamp it. So that is the purpose of stamping. So when a transaction from A to B is the private transaction itself, then it doesn't get recognized by the third party. So for example, you sell a house to another buyer, the buyer needs to borrow money from the bank. The bank would not honor this until it is stamped. So this part for stamping, it means that from A to B is one process, and from B to C another process, or the similar process can repeat in many times. The government is just doing its role to make it official and to make it recognizable in law. And that part, the government makes money out of it, so tax you the money so that the revenue goes to government for government operational expenditure. So let's say in this scenario, from spouse to husband to wife, and from the case of husband having a illness or terminal ill, the transfer of property to the wife, basically in the case the government should not make it difficult. So this part of the stamp duty also is 100% waived. However, from the father to the children, or the parent to the children, the exemption or the government is only to give leniency of 50%. So you still have to pay 50%. So this part is different from RPGT. RPGT is on the gain. So sometimes the issue is you do not actually have a gain because you transfer your property basically among your members of the family. So you are not making money. It's not arm's length transaction anyway. So not making money. So government should not be too fussy, because if government is fussy, then they will say husband transfer to wife or parent transfer to children, we don't make money, we make loss. So government still have to understand the mentality of the rakyat, people wanting to survive just over the issue of having a property, roof over the head. So this is the reason. So grandparents to grandchildren also for transfer of RPGT is 100% exempted, but not for stamp duty. So for grandparents transfer to grandchild, it is 100% payable for stamp duty. So these are where you can try and understand and try to remember in a more understandable way as to go to exam, not confused between stamp duty and RPGT. So let's say we go back to the law. The law is Real Property Gains Tax Act 1976 as of 1st of December 2021, the copy that I used. Anyway, the 2022 amendment is not seen here, but anyway, just to briefly guide you through. Well, to study for the exam, you may not need to read the whole act. So just go to Schedule 2. Schedule 2, Schedule 3, and Schedule 4 and 5. Just the schedule. The act proper itself, you have time, you go and read. But if you don't have time, then pay all the attention to Schedule 2. Because Schedule 2 is a heavy one, many parts. So this part on the Schedule 2, I like to attract your attention to chargeable gains and allowable losses, arrangement of paragraph under the index is number 3, transaction with disposal price deemed equal to acquisition price. And then give on the paragraph 12. So how you write when you say it is a give, then you have to write schedule 2 para 12. Right? So if you make a treatment on your calculation, let's say that there is a give, no gain, no loss, then you put down there at the side referring to schedule 2 para 12. Or in a conditional contract, I said that's now para 16. And now we see the interpretation. So sometimes there will be tricky questions. Stepchild or child adopted by an individual. So whether the stepchild or child adopted by individual actually can qualify for the exemption or not. So this type of example, so sometimes they give this type of question. Next is on the the para 3 transaction. Devotion of an asset to deceased person. Deceased means died, person on his executor of legally under the will or intestacy or the trustee of the trusted and treated under his will. Transfer of asset between spouses or transfer asset owned by an individual or by his wife by individual. This one, the whole lot equals, meaning no gain, no loss. So when you look at just now the exemption, some of these exemptions appear as in no gain, no loss. That means there is price equal. That means you sell between family members or close family members, like father to son or grandparents to grandchildren. Then the acquisition price equals to the disposal price. That means that the gain is 0, no gain, and also no loss. So such a way, then although you put in the tax rate, it is still no tax. Give to the government or state government. So let's say you donate a gift of land to government for construction of school or whatever. And then although there is a exchange, a transfer of property, but then there is no gain, no loss also in that sense. Disposal of asset in the result of compulsory acquisition. Let's say government suddenly take over a piece of land, or due to reason of construction or by a proposed project, then the developer make acquisition of the property. So in that situation, it is forced by law, enforced by law. So when it's enforced by law, the exchange took place, but then the disposed price and the acquisition price is equal, so there is no gain. So you take the compensation money, no need to pay RPGT. So all this in effect only applies when it's a citizen. So if you are a foreigner, then different. If you are a foreigner, of course, subject to a different rate. So these are where I want to highlight with boxes. Incidental costs, you got to pay attention. What are the incidental costs you can deduct out? Some of these costs like cost of paying stamp duty, engaging your lawyer fee, or engaging an estate agent. You can actually take the cost out. So anyway, these are calculations that I said I won't go into too detail. You go back to my earlier video to understand how this incidental cost is in way inserted in the calculation part of the RPGT. Say like in this case, in the case of an acquisition, the cost of advertising to find a seller. Right, for a person who acquire, then if you say advertise it on a newspaper or advertise it in certain platforms, then the amount of money spent, a few hundred ringgit or a few thousand ringgit, then this amount of money can be included to take out the profit. That means his acquisition price will be much higher because he has expended the money. So in the disposal, let's say he disposed it later, then disposal price minus a higher acquisition price, then it makes his gain less. So all the incidental costs in acquiring a property should be added into the property cost. So makes the acquisition price higher. In the case of a disposal, the cost of advertising to find a buyer and a cost reasonably incurred for the purpose of this act is making any valuation or in ascertaining market value. So in the case of a disposal, after engaging a estate agent or legal officer to work on the sales and purchase agreement, these costs are actually all deducted by reducing the disposal price. So your price reduce lower, so your profit also lower, and therefore you pay less real property gains tax. So what are the excluded expenditure? So sometimes there are people who simply put all these expenses into the calculation to try to make the profit less. So what are the things that should be excluded, cannot be included? This is number 9. Certain transaction deemed to be at market value. So this one is very important. This one very important, because that you at times cannot use the disposal price. So the acquisition or disposal of an asset by a person shall be deemed to be for a consideration equal to the market value. That means when there is no arm's length transaction, that means between, let's say, spouse, or between some of these close family members, where there is no more arm's length transaction, then market value would have to be used. So a lot of time can be by way of gift. So sometimes uncle giving to nephew, brother giving to sister, all these things you cannot say it is arm's length transaction. So it becomes difficult to of course people try to escape from paying taxes. So they will say they are selling it extra cheap, or they call it rock bottom cheap, for the fact that it is a relationship, no arm's length. So in such a manner, it is almost like a gift. So when it is almost by a gift, then you have to use market value by JPBH. And some of these transactions also cannot be valued. Sometimes due to situation of very complicated business deal, people use property to pay their debts. So when they use property to pay their debts, this also have issue on actually how to value the property. And a lot of time this will have to go back to the JPBH value now. So when there is no straightforward calculation, then go back to the JPBH to get a market value. So definition of market value, here it puts that subject to this paragraph, market value for asset which is acquired or disposed of is the price which it would fetch if it is to be sold in a transaction between persons dealing at arm's length at time of the acquisition or disposal. And in times of gift, subject to subparagraph 2. So gift, if you let's say this particular case, the auntie wanting to leave something behind for the little kid, the nephew or the niece, then the auntie gave the house in the will, and therefore it became a gift. So this type of situation shall deem to be disposed at the market value, where the donor and the recipient refer to paragraph 1 as husband and wife, parent and children, or grandparent and grandchildren, then it will not be considered as a gift as it is. It will be considered as no gain, no loss. So people sitting for the exam, this one is important. So if you although say that, well, mother and son giving property from mother to the son, it should be no gain, no loss. It's also a gift. So by way of gift, it should follow market value. But then because this subject to subparagraph 2a, so here it says schedule 2 para 12 subparagraph 2 and subparagraph a, the donor shall be deemed to have received no gain and suffer no loss. So there is no conflicting lah. It's tidak bercanggah. It's not conflicting with the transfer the exemption that I mentioned earlier on. Anyway, exchange in that sense also important. Sometimes people swap, property swap. That of disposal and acquisition generally. So this one also, if you look at it, it's the time where it is completed. The acquisition must be completed. So for the person who acquire, it has to be totally completed. then the disposal equals to the acquisition. So if it is conditional contract, then it follows the state authority time of approval. Right, we just move on. Conditional contract also mentioned here. Transfer of asset between companies and in the same group. So this is regarding one question which always will come out in D04. That is about real property company. So real property company, there will be always one question which is quite confusing and complicated. Different holding company, shares, and control company. After that, selling these shares to other company, and then a lot more shares, and later on these shares again transfer hand. So all these events, transfer of shares is involving a control company should be handled or treatment being made as according to the real property gains tax. So this part just highlight to you is important to understand, because there's one question, but I would advise candidate not to attempt this question, because it's quite confusing. Right, so here we have one part which is acquisition price in particular cases. So this one is important to highlight, because in Schedule 2 there is section Schedule 2 para 19. It talks about acquisition price in a particular case. When a gift an asset on death shall be deemed to be acquisition at equal to market value. This one is very confusing with just now the the para 12 and the para 9. So what it says is that when it involves a person who passed on or died, when the property is being inherited, the value of the property should be on the day of the death. The person died, that value should be the value, market value, to be considered for the recipient, the acquisition of the recipient. And the whole process is no gain, no loss. So the whole process no need to pay RPGT lah. So this scenario, I give a story. Let's say father having illness and died, then the property previously was 300,000, now given to the son. On the day which was given to the son, the transfer completed, it cost 800,000. Later on, the son sold it for 1 million. So is it again based on the original 300,000, or is it based on the time of the person died, which is 800,000? The answer is the market value 800,000 on the time the person died. So this one I will give an example later. Here, under the RPGT Act, there is no exemption. There were exemption, no gain, no loss. There was also cases where when the person inherited it and then immediately sell. So when this immediately sell, the value used would be, as I said just now, the issue of a person died, then it is market value during that moment, which is Schedule 2 para 9 sub para 1. So you can go back to the video to read lah. So it touch on the next is the transfer of asset to control company. This one I just rush through lah. So if you are not into this question, one question on real property company, no need to go into detail. So Schedule 3 is about private residence. So this part I highlighted just now. The Schedule 3 para 9 sub para 1, subject to this paragraph, individual is entitled, Malaysian citizen entitled to an exemption under Section 8. For that, he can elect such exemption should apply to a private residence. So if you interpret in this manner, as a citizen of Malaysia, we have to have a roof over our head. So if you have the basic right of a shelter, then if you forego this right as a shelter, you don't have a shelter anymore. The government should not be too harsh to tax on your only shelter, one only shelter. So a lot of scenario like having to sell the property to get money, to cash for illness, for certain important business decision or to survive, to rescue yourself, then government should not tax on the gains. So this is the reason exemption being given. You can elect to exempt from this. Of course, a lot of time people will say, oh, never mind, because I even more property, I have 5 properties, then I will use the most expensive one to get this election to waive the gains tax. So of course, let's say you bought a property that you have appreciated in price of 1 million within 3 years. Wow. Then you want to use this election of a private resident to be exempted from RPGT. Okay, Schedule 4 is about exemption. So it talks about this part, amount of 10,000 ringgit or 10% of chargeable gain, whichever is greater. So just now I used the 500,000 example, and also I used another one which is 200,000 example. So the house was valued at 2,000, year 2000, which is 500,000, and it was sold at 1 million. So the 500,000 gain was subject to tax. So this is chargeable gain. So chargeable gain minus 10%, which is 50,000. Here say whichever is greater. So if 50,000 is greater than 10,000, so it takes away 50,000, it becomes 450,000. Similarly, the 200,000 take away 20,000, become 180,000. So this is how it's used in examination when you show your calculation. So you refer to Schedule 4, Para 2. Here, Schedule 5 is about tax rate, rates of tax updated to 2022. So the part on Para, from the 4th paragraph, 5% became new. So that is about all I like to present today. On the conclusion, I just said that, well, we've gone through RPGT recent changes compressed. It's about quick one. We went through historical situation where earlier days it was 30%, and at one time 2010 it reduced down to 5% because of the 2008 depression. And after that, went back to 30% for the first 3 years. Recent changes happened in 2018 to 2022, included the base year issue. So when they introduced the base year of year 2000, and later on in 2019 bill, which introduced the base year 2013. So 2020 and 2021, these 2 years, when you sell your property, the old property still go back to year 2013 value. Finance Act, it was introduced 2018 and 2019. Base year changes. And we went through some main understanding of how certain government exemptions, why certain elections of exemptions has to be in place to safeguard the rakyat, the right of rakyat to own a home. And also we went through taxes and deductible, although in surface we did not go in very detail how to actually reduce your RPGT. We also went in for this Exemption Order 2020 from June 1st until 31st December 2020 to 2021. So it's 1.5 year advantage of 3 property election to be exempted from RPGT. We went through some area of revision on the Schedule 2, especially the differences between spouse, between parents and children, grandparents and grandchildren, and also some of the issues are passed on. People die, what is the value to use? We also touch on a bit on issues of real property company. So a key area of revision we covered a bit, and I just want to say that if you get confused over stamp duty and RPGT, you have to think about it on purpose in mind. The purpose in mind. So why the government has this purpose of doing this exemption? What is the purpose? Like I said just now, a person should be able to enjoy a home in his whole life. So he would have a home, but then when he wanted to sell this home for certain reason, it should not be taxable. So he has no more home. He already sold his house. So the government should not be harsh to tax on his gain. He want to use the gain for a reason. So that is the way that you should remember how not to confuse between different types of exemptions in the RPGT or stamp duty. So okay, thank you very much. I'm Thomas Sim, PA 2066. I have a few websites. Findway.info is a geo linking advertising website. estateagentexam.com is a website for study of diploma in the estate agency, board recognized diploma for registration as a PA, as well as eventual passing of the TBC, become a registered estate agent. And my Real Property Online is a website for my video collection and also some of my listings and my write-ups. Contract2you.com is a website for index ranking. So I try to do index ranking for all property listings. Because Real Estate.fund is a website which is easy to implement low cost maintenance type of website. Thank you very much for following this video. See you in another video. Bye bye.